once I see it's live here.
There we go. Looks like it's live now.
Is it?
On the top left corner of the screen, it shows
Okay.
on my end at least.
Yeah, we're
Yeah,
live.
we're live. Okay,
Definitely.
why am I not seeing it? This happens to me every time. So, oh, there it is. Okay. Gotcha. All right. All right, Dan, I'm going to count you down in three, two, one.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode podcast here. This is episode number 28. It's Greg Fernandez's book called The Gray Stage, written by Greg Fernandez Jr. We'll be covering chapter 13 today. The title of chapter 13 is The Father of Komel. Now, if you're following along in the book, hardcover, soft cover, I should say, page 119 is what we're going to be starting off on today. We're guests. We're joined with Sophia, William, myself, Greg Fernandez Jr., the author. All four of us are here, and we're going to cover that chapter today. It's a very short chapter, but it's packed with a lot of information. And I think it's going to, in fact, I'm pretty sure it'll take up the entire hour, just those 2 pages. So this is a chapter I've been looking forward to, for a while here. And I'm looking forward to those of us joining us on the YouTube as well. Welcome to everyone. How are you doing today, Greg?
Oh, so far so good. Just another beautiful Sunday here.
William and Sophia, how are you?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Doing well, thank you.
It's an interesting chapter, of course. It's just, like I said, it's 2 pages, but it's got a lot of information because we're actually able to reach out and touch base live on the phone with Komel's father, Anjum Alam, who was living in Texas at the time. And so this really takes the cake. We're 7 months after the bodies were discovered here, and I think we can start. Any questions to start off with before we start?
Not really, not from my end. I hope. I mean, this is the first time we're doing this live, I believe here, so a little early, but I wanted to test this out. But
Yeah, just the background to this is I was at work the day that this all happened, and I had looked up the phone number, I think whitepages.com or something, to try to find a contact number for Anjum. And what I found was a work number popped up and a home number popped up. And during my lunch break that day, I was in the office and I took a lunch break, went into an empty conference room and just called and left messages on both of his lines. Number one, I didn't know if they were even the accurate phone number. I don't know if it was even accurate, if it was old or outdated, but I just I bit the bullet and just dialed the number, and was nervous. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't even know if I was going to get him live or not. But I thought, worst case, I can leave a message. Worst case, the phone has been disconnected. I have to try this. So what I did was call both numbers. They were both live, active numbers, and had voicemails. One was just a generic one, so I felt awkward leaving a number to just a generic voicemail to a number that may not have been him picking up, talking about a triple homicide. And then the other time it was actually his voicemail. So I left a message on both. That was it. I went back to work, and this whole story starts about, it was 4:35 in the evening.
wow.
I was wrapping up work, packing up my stuff, ready to get in my car for my commute home. And I look on my phone and it says Anjum Alam. I had it typed into my contact list. And so this is how that's the backstory of how this all kind of came to be. Here we go. Page 119, Father of Komel. On August 8th, 2015, independent researcher Dan Hennen spoke with David Crowley's father-in-law, Anjum Alam, for 37 minutes. Here are some of Dan Hennen's notes from the 37-minute conversation. And so the reason I have notes, and the reason I know it's 37 minutes, is because when I hung up, call ended, it said 37 minutes. I thought, I'm going to write that down because someone's going to ask, how long did you talk with them? And I had some Post-it notes in my car along with the pen. And as I came to a stop sign or stoplights, I was able to jot some things down, but I didn't have a recording device set up. I had nothing at my disposal to really track it except for a bunch of Post-it notes with some chicken scratches on it. So that's what happened. It was 37 minutes. I talked with him, and I took some notes. I know who you are, Mr. Alam said when Dan called him. Quote, not in a bad way, Dan wrote in his notes, but certainly he knew my name. And, he said, I know who you are. Not in a derogatory term, I know who you are. He said, yep, you don't have to go through with the pleasantries and introductions. I do know who you are. So he said, quote, if I had time and money, Mr. Alam assured to Dan, I would be interested in investigating this entire thing. And those were his words. I was very wowed when I heard that. And so that's why I remember that very clearly. Mr. Alam's wife, Nyla, was dealing with some serious medical issues at the time. He said, quote, Nyla still doesn't know about the murders. Remember, this is August. The bodies were found in January 17th of 2015. This is August, 7 months later. And he says she still doesn't even know the murders took place. And so I want the listener or the reader, the follower here, to understand the concept, the gravity of that. That's how bad situation that she was in. She was in the hospital in the hospice care for cancer, but they still couldn't break the news to her. A birthday, he said, is coming up. Ronnie or Komel, one of them. We now know that it was Ronnie. Komel's birthday is November 20th. Ronnie's was August 6th. And to this day, currently, as we speak, if Rania was still alive, she'd be 13 years old. She'd be a teenager. So her birthday was actually 2 days before my phone call on August 8th. And so what I meant is, I think what he meant was a birthday or a party or a celebration was coming up. And he says, I'm not sure how to handle that because she's been asking about possible gifts. Now, this is Nyla asking, what do you think Rania would like? Very awkward conversations at the least, I could imagine. Mr. Alam found out about the deaths of David, Komel, and Rania while visiting his wife in the hospital. According to Dan Hennen's notes about the conversation with Komel's father, quote, he heard about the killings at 2 a.m. while in intensive care with Nyla, a nurse said to Anjum. There's a visitor here. Nyla was awake when Mr. Alam left the room and was concerned when it took her husband 3 hours to return. 3 hours. Mr. Alam told his wife that the visit was work-related. So he also had to steer that conversation so it wouldn't turn into something else because he was gone for 3 hours. Basically the length of a football game, an NFL football game. That's how long he was gone talking on the phone with the investigators or what have you. That's a long time. Quote, it took him 3 hours to pull himself together, Dan continued. So I think the call itself, what he was getting to me was the call didn't take very long. He took the 3 hours to pull himself together. At first, Mr. Alam did not know about the GoFundMe campaign set up for Nyla Alam by David's brother. Mr. Alam also, quote, didn't know why Dan Crowley Jr. set up the fund after finding out that he did. He requested to shut it down. He thought it was done in poor taste. That was a quote he said to me, Anjum Alam. He said, I didn't know about it when he first found out about it. And he found out that Dan Crowley Jr. set it up. He didn't know who Dan Crowley Jr. was. He may have heard of him. Didn't know. And he thought it was done in poor taste. They were looking for, how many $1 million or something. $6 million wasn't the GoFundMe set up for? And it said it was set up for the medical costs for the Alam family or something. He said it very, very, it was very vague the way they set up, but he shut it down. It's still not clear to me, this is me personally now, Dan, if Mr. Alam received the $8,000 raised by the GoFundMe campaign at the bottom of page 119 there. So this was August 8th. All this took place. He knew about it. They shut down the campaign. He thought it was done in poor taste. Now we get on to page 120 in the file. I assured Mr. Alam, Dan Hennen wrote in his notes, quote, "We are on the same page and only want the truth. No need to come to conclusions, but that the police version simply doesn't add up. I informed him that there is interest by several people to open an independent investigation, but nothing can be done until the police close their case." So this was still an active investigation at this point. If we were looking to hire a private investigator, or if Mr. Alam was, that still couldn't be done until the case is closed. As far as us filing for our FOIA requests and such, we still couldn't do any of that until the case was closed. So as the time of this phone call, the case was still an open pending investigation. I mentioned that there are people in the group that would help with this and raise money to get this done if it were his wishes. He had said earlier that, like I said, he doesn't have the time or the money to do it. And so my offer was really that there are people interested in doing this. We could do this on his behalf if he's interested in doing this. Basically, I'm waiting for the green light for him to give me an action item for it. I don't want to do it on my own, but I just asked him if he's interested. That part seemed to lighten him up a bit, knowing many people have his back. And I found that to be very interesting because at first, this whole concept of this murder, he was taken aback, still trying to gather his thoughts and put all this together, while at the same time knowing that there was conspiracy theories and forums on the internet talking about this case in great detail. And so I really needed to spell it out that, look, we're on the same page. We're looking for truth. We're not here to point any fingers at anybody. We want to get down to the truth. And there's a lot of us out here. By this time, we had many, many people on the Justice page, probably 300 at that time. I know we're coming up on 4,000 now, but at the time, I think there was well over 300 people in this case in the Justice group. That seemed to lighten him up, knowing that so many people had his back and we were actually on the same side. At first, I think there was a hesitation as far as, what are your motives? What is the Justice group out there? What are they doing? What are they talking about? Why are they talking about it? What's their true goal? None of us know anyone in the case. And so I just basically reassured him that we have his back. We're on your side. Going forward, Mr. Alam believes the official theory of a double murder suicide, quote, but is looking forward to the final results. Anjum felt that the AVPD was negligible to some extent after the incident on 10/19/14 involving Komel's sister. And so to quickly reiterate that was before the homicide. His other daughter, Sidra, drove up with her fiance, Vinny, to get one of the cars back, drive up. They're all from Texas, down near Waco, to drive up to the Minneapolis-St. Paul area near Apple Valley, swap out one of the cars. And there was an incident on October 19th that involved the Apple Valley Police Department. Sidra was not hearing anything back from her sister and thought, I'm not sure what's going on there in the house. She went to the Apple Valley Police Department first to say, look, I just have a heads up. I'm going to be doing almost what I would call essentially almost a welfare check at the same time as switching out the cars. And there was a strange activity that ensued. They got the car. They didn't see Komel. They did see David. And something seemed off. And because the police were involved and they didn't do anything and didn't track it other than just logging it in their notes, Mr. Alam, back in August of 2015, felt that if there was some domestic abuse or a domestic situation or something fishy in the relationship, that they could have been invested. They could have been more helpful back then. We still don't know. This was 7 months after everything happened. So he was more, I think, pointing at that first incident. that already left him with reservations about the Apple Valley Police Department, more so than the whole triple homicide itself. Now, Dan wrote that Mr. Alam, quote, knew David had some issues and found the scenario plausible because they had shut out many insiders. But he still doesn't understand how the AVPD can rush to a judgment of homicide/suicide so quickly in this case. He also believes that before saying that, they should have had proof or something. Now, this is this is an important deal because now we get a true outsider looking into this case, connected to the family, but a true outsider, many states away, wondering if the investigation is open, it's not yet done, it's not solved. How can they rush to a double murder followed by a suicide in this case? Even he, like Greg yourself said from the very beginning, you can't rush to judgment on something this large, of this magnitude. Yes, of course, it looks like that. It appeared like that. That may have been their working assumption, but Apple Valley at this time had already come forward saying, that's our working analysis. We are assuming that David did this. We're just going to collect the rest of the facts and finish it all off, tie all this in a nice little bow and present it to the public as a completed case. Well, Anjum already at this point said maybe it did happen. I just can't believe that they would rush to judgment. Now, he does say that David had some issues. So I don't get that. I'm not sure. He did not elaborate, but things were going on. I'm assuming that he's talking about this October case when Sidra went up to visit and get the car. And he said, come back. David said, come back an hour later, have the car cleaned up. And she's like, that was just odd. They had to go wait in at a supermarket or a department store or something for an hour in a parking lot until he was done. Then they swapped out the cars. But David looked disheveled, wasn't himself. And so that's my only conjecture, my only thing that I can assume here is that Anjum is talking about this. They got along real good. There's much evidence to support that Anjum got along good with David, and the Anjum and the Alam family did, and much to, things like that. They had a good relationship. So it's very interesting that this next paragraph is very important. Mr. Alam did confirm that David, quote, had a deal of some sorts because he was excited, and said he only had to change a few things in the script, end quote. Anjum mentioned a picture on the internet of David and a couple of Hollywood producers sharing a congratulatory glass of champagne in Hollywood. Now, we know that photo that later came out of those guys with the mics, meeting with the mics, having a glass of champagne, and excited about the project. That's Mike O'Donnell, and I'm not sure the other Michael's last name, but that was true. Anjum was following David and his posts on social media and was excited about these types of things. And he did confirm that David had a deal. Now, the only way he confirmed he had a deal was because I asked him directly about it. Did David have a contract, a deal with Hollywood, a movie deal? The first months after this case, when everything was being exposed, the only thing, Greg, that I remember with you and I battling for months is that folks said there was no deal. David was depressed. He had no money. But this was all coming from the Gray State goons. We put this all together later to saying that may not be true. That may not be true at all. These guys are planting that narrative. For what reason? Why would they be planting a narrative that he's down, depressed, didn't have a contract? Well, they wanted to beef up the story that David did this. Why would that be? Should be a normal person's question would be, why are they trying to steer the narrative at all? Why do they want David to be guilty? Greg, you yourself asked them several times, if he was your best friend, why are you throwing him under the bus? That's a very fair question, but we were getting that left and right, even to the listeners out there on the live recording chat room. I'm not sure if it's being talked about now, but that's all that we got hit with right off the bat was David was depressed, had no money, and because his contract was turned down, that's why he was in depression, and that's what led him to carry out these acts. We know now 7 years later, all of that was hogwash. None of it was true. He did have the deal. So I wanted to make sure, because that one thing bugging me was everything on David's website and his Facebook and his social media said that he was going in a new direction, hiring new people. He was looking forward to this. But everything that we heard from everyone else was he didn't have the deal. Well, Anjum confirmed he did. He was excited about it. So that left me feeling good that we were on the right track, Greg, because now we get the first confirmation that we're going down that right track. And there was that picture. Once we found that picture of those guys in Hollywood celebrating, it kind of put the pieces together. In a sense, the final paragraph says, quotes, "In a sense, he wants to put it behind him," Dan stated, "as he thinks about it every day. But after chatting, his curiosity is raised, I believe." And the quote at the very end of the chapter, and I like, Greg, how you put this in here in the very last quote, was a quote that says, "Regardless of who did this," Anjum said, "they will face judgment by God." So a man of faith essentially says, I don't know who did it. Maybe David did. Maybe we don't know who did it. And maybe we'll never know who did it. But he was at peace knowing that that person or persons will face judgment by God one day. If we never get judgment here, as far as if we finally, find out what really happens. Now, this is all very interesting, and I'd like to get Sophia and William's take on this as well, because to me, I hung up, and Greg, I think I called you right away because I said we finally got a phone call with Anjum, the father. We couldn't get a hold of Nyla because she was in intensive care, and I think we were already in communication with Sidra, I believe, at that time. But no one else would talk to us, from the family. The Crowleys, Allison, we never heard from. The father, David's father, we didn't. And all we heard from Dan Crowley Jr., David's older brother, was the GoFundMe that he set up. Raised $8,000. They cut that off, and I guess later they put that towards some nonprofits or something. They put it to good use is all we got. We never had any kind of confirmation of where that money went to in the first place. But I was very satisfied being able to get through and talk to him live, and have him know who I was, and to let him know that we're on his side. We feel for the family. And he did say that he would like to investigate this case fully if he had the time and the money. Any questions on this, Sophia?
No, my main takeaway from your conversation with Mr. Alam was that he seemed very positive talking to you and about what the purpose of the group was and everything. But it broke my heart about his conversation with Nala and about the birthday party coming up and how she didn't know still. That was painful to hear, because I just don't understand why they kept her in the dark for so long.
And now just to come full circle, it did appear from what we were told that they did at one point sit down and tell her the whole story. So she was aware of it. I'm not sure how in depth they got to it, how much she was picking up, depending on her state of mind in the hospital. She has recently passed away, so she has since died. But I was on the phone with him live when this took place, and I couldn't almost believe it that he said we haven't told her yet. We have a birthday coming up. She's asking for presents. I'm dealing with all of this strangeness.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I think you're right. That really hit home. William, do you have any comments on this? How was it like for you when you joined the group and found out about this later on? How did it impact you by getting this actual phone call data? William might be on mute, but I also have a comment when he does come on or after he's done.
Oh, sorry about that. I
there
totally
you
thought,
go. Ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
totally
William.
thought
What was
I.
it like for you in the timeline of all this going on that we were able to make contact with the
I mean,
father?
I was thoroughly impressed. I thought it was a good thing. And then especially find out that he did want to go and have that the Dan Crowley Jr. funds shut down, and he thought it was in poor taste. I totally agree. But what I was a little shocked by was that he believed the double murder suicide, all because he thought David had some issues, so he found it plausible. I mean, it doesn't take much to look at the scene. I mean, if he hadn't seen the pictures, then I can kind of understand. But if he had seen the pictures, to just kind of rush to that automatically, and like he's like, all right, yeah, I believe it. I mean,
Now, the only thing, William, with that is, and Greg can back me up if you can, is at this time, 7 months later, the investigation wasn't done, which means we had no photographs, right? We didn't
Right.
get the 464 photographs till later. I think he made one or maybe two trips up to Minneapolis, St. Paul. Other than that, he dealt with the detectives over the phone calls and emails is what I think. So he wasn't real too connected with it. The
Gotcha.
investigations, things that we came up with later and that have uncovered was all later. But at this time, William, I think most people did think that David did this. So it didn't surprise me that he also believed it. But I did like the fact that Mr. Alam did say that I question how they arrived at that so soon. And David
Right.
could have done it. He was going through issues, but he still was hesitant, I believe. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, no, 100%. Because the thing is like he says he has issues, but he never said like things like PTSD, right? Never said anything like
No.
this. See, so we don't know what he's talking about. Maybe he's talking issues. Maybe he had, let's say, a temper. Who knows? I mean, you can see through his journal entries, you can kind of see that he kind of fluctuates between his emotions a little bit. You can see that, but I don't think it was like anything too drastic. And I think Anjum knew that, but I don't, I mean, I don't know Anjum. So
It's very interesting. Now, the other thing I want to note, and William, you may have this as well because it doesn't tie back to the book, but it ties back to the entire timeline. As we take a step back and look what was going on at the time, my timeline here for August 8th, in addition to this phone call, which blew me away, we go back now later and find out that family and friends and the boyfriend of Kate Crowley could not reach her that day.
right.
The very next day, they find her dead with no reason provided. David Crowley's mother in Owatonna, Minnesota, was found dead the very next day after I had this phone call. So this was all going on at the same time. We didn't know it, of course, until it came out later, but they were trying to get a hold of Kate Crowley as the Alam family was dealing with all this other nonsense. Kate Crowley was non-responsive in her phone calls. That very same day, we find out later that they did a welfare check and found her dead. So David's mother now dies and becomes the fourth Crowley family victim to die in a span of 7 months.
Right.
Greg, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I think that's a huge point. I think there's a lot of great things being said here. I definitely want to keep talking about this, especially that time. This is why the timeline is so important, because that didn't even register that it was one day after. So
Well, what I do for these shows, Greg, is before we go on and talk about the actual chapter of the book, I try to bring up the timeline to see if we find out anything that was going on concurrently before, after, or during the time when we were all focused on this one thing. I was calling you. I don't even know if we posted it yet on the Justice page that we made contact with Anjum. No, I'm pretty sure we didn't, because I think we talked amongst us as moderators to say, how do we present this to the group that we're able to reach out to him? And so I think we did a show on it later, but when we first announced it, the naysayers were saying that's bogus. Dan made it up.
that's right.
All Anjum.
That wasn't
way
him.
He talked to him.
Right.
We made this whole thing up, and you guys are falling for it once again. And so that's the first thing we faced the backlash for. This is all bogus. Sean Wright, I think, was involved with that too. There's no way he reached out. Dan says he made a phone call and got through. Hogwash. That's all we were dealing with at the time. But then we find out later that Kate's mother died. But this was that same afternoon. They could not get a hold of her for work. I don't know if she didn't show up or what, but they did a welfare check and they found the body outside on the patio, slumped over on a table and chairs. And it's August. It's common in Minnesota here to be outside that time of year. It's lovely. In fact, it's very hot when it gets to August here in Minnesota. People don't know how warm it gets up here and how many 100-degree days we have up here. But very common to be outside on the patio that time.
Well, what's also interesting about that is the connections with that, with the mother as well, to Allison and Dan Jr. And you see Dan Jr. taking that whole account, the whole will, essentially, which I thought was a little odd too. So now you've got somebody that didn't agree with the narrative, really, was even saying it would have had to have been a mutual decision between David and Komel. And yet now all of a sudden she's passed away, and now Dan Jr.'s now got a hold of said account or will, if you will. I thought that was a little odd as well.
Yeah, and how that played out is David, of course, is dead. There's only 3 kids. Allison was living in either Wisconsin or Illinois or Washington, D.C. by that point. I think Illinois or Wisconsin.
Yeah, it was Illinois.
She was getting her plans, ready to be married. She was engaged. And so what took place there in 2015, in August, the mother dies. And I've got on my notes here is that Allison, on Friday, August 14th, signs away her rights to be the administrator of her late mother's estate. She goes ahead and nominates her brother Dan Jr. to be the executor of the estate at that point. So all that happened within a week, from the 8th to the 14th, 6 days. We talked to Alam, Anjum. Kate dies, and already Allison's signing over her information, possibly unwittingly. As I do believe, Allison maybe to this day doesn't know what really happened, but for sure not back then. And she sends it over to her brother to deal with as she's getting ready for her wedding. Dan is here in the state. He's close by, the brother. And she just, I think, assumes that, how about you take care of it? But when you see how fast these things move along and the circumstances, it makes one wonder, was she pressured by any way just to get the ball rolling, to move it along? He may have been saying, look, sign it over. I can get the ball rolling with all this, because they soon afterwards had a big garage sale, an estate sale that he posted on social media that he was running, and they were selling her belongings, which seemed to be very odd. But yes, then the will went missing, and then it came back and said that, there was very strange circumstances surrounding Kate's death. Now, be that as it may, maybe they were strange, maybe they weren't. But keep in mind, like William said earlier, the mother of David, Kate Crowley, was the only one of either side of the family to say this whole thing doesn't sound right. This doesn't sound like something David would do, or Komel. She's basically saying, I don't buy any of it.
Mm-hmm.
And she's the one that winds up dead with the suspicious will missing and a boyfriend that we never hear of from again. He never made a comment or anything, never joined the group. He and I don't know, we don't know if that was a killing, if that was an assassination to tie off any loose ends, to eliminate a liability. Was it a message sent to others not to mess around? Because we didn't hear anything from him. They were divorced. The Crowley parents were divorced. She was seeing another a gentleman, had a boyfriend at the time, and he came over and said, I found her laying there. And so this is where things really got to be interesting, I believe. And maybe to this day, there's nothing to do with anything. Maybe these are all just circumstantial things, but I think they're important to put in the timeline,
right,
to see the big picture and take a step back, because they all could be very tightly connected. Anything on that, Sophia, do you think?
Well, I was just about to ask, how soon after she passed away did they have the sale?
The sale, I am guessing, I could look it up in my notes. It wasn't that soon. It wasn't that rushed, but I
Okay.
think it was a month or two later that he made the 45-minute drive south to Owatonna, a
Uh-huh.
smaller town in Minnesota, to sit there at a table, a card table with a chair, and run the garage sale. But he was also very active in getting a real estate agent to put the house up for sale and get it ready and get it sold, because that all landed in his lap, I think, as well. Maybe not him personally, but as the executor of the estate. That all those deals in the sale, the money of the house, the money from the car that she had, and all of her assets, which maybe were a lot, maybe were a little. Nonetheless, they fell to him to then distribute.
I got a question for you then. So, as I believe he's currently a real estate agent, if I'm not mistaken. So when did he actually become a real estate agent?
Okay, so there's two different things. Dan Crowley Jr.
Mhm.
Hired a real estate agent to sell the house.
Right.
So he worked with an agent to do that. And then later on, a couple years later, he became an investment. He got into investments or an investment banker. I don't believe Dan Crowley Jr. was ever a real estate agent, but I could be wrong. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, as I could have sworn I saw something as I was looking at, there was an address that popped up. I don't remember how I came to that, but I ended up running into it, and it was Dan Jr. and it was an office. Him and another guy had an office. And I'm pretty sure it said real estate is what they were dealing with.
Okay, and it may have been the sign out front when they bought the property to move in there for their office or get the lease or something. I don't believe that's the case, but he was in investments or buying and selling stock or handling stock for other people. Now, he didn't have a job or a career, as far as I know, before all this happened. He was an athletic trainer and was worried about getting in shape and doing things with Mason Hendricks, Danny August Mason, Sean Wright, and all these other guys. He was very connected with those guys and being healthy and doing CrossFit and cross training. And so he was mainly spending his time at the gym and was kind of in and out of jobs. And so,
from what I understood too, is he was also he's the one who got David involved with CrossFit too. From what
I
I could
believe
see.
so.
So
Yeah,
as I could have sworn there were some pictures throughout. I think it was a journal of him doing training with Komel and David.
Yeah, and they were in those years, I think 2012, 2013, 2014, they did all, as far as I know, get along, work out together, do exercise together, and stay in shape together. They were all very aligned that way as far as eating healthy and whatnot. Now, Dan Crowley Jr. did have a couple of DUI arrests in between there and beforehand as well. So he was also having fun on the side, in addition to staying healthy. But whatever happened around that birthday party, or before the birthday party, July, August of 2014, before the bodies were discovered, is whatever it was, is it cracked that relationship. David was not talking to Dan. David was not talking to, I don't even think, possibly even his father at that point. And something had strained, something that was said resulted in David breaking off the relationship with his own brother, Dan Jr., and allegedly left him crying per Komel's conversation. It really hit home. And so he cut that off. So they were not on speaking terms at all the last 5 months of his life.
Right. But it was, I mean, if you look at it, like even with his old phone numbers up until up until August, there would be conversation. But then after that, it was I think it was shortly before, it was right before that party, and all of a sudden the conversations basically just dropped off.
I think the event that took place was either at the party, maybe Sophia knows, shortly before, shortly after, something about that August timeframe when Ronnie's birthday is, and we know her birthday is August 6th. We've got the actual date of the party. It may have been the 14th. I don't have it right offhand, but something significant happened at that party, before or after, with his brother Dan. It was something that was said, and it's something that was very inappropriate, was suggested, that we have often talked about within our group, sexual molestation, maybe with Rania, something that was possibly inappropriate. It also related on babysitting being cut off as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've only speculated, but I think we're still headed down that right path, or whatever it is. It must have been something to do with something in that case, along those lines, I should say.
Right. I want to correct myself. It was on August 10th. Was when her birthday party was.
Okay.
So, but yeah, no, I fully agree with you. I think there is something there, especially because they're cutting off babysitting duties. They're cutting them off, and it's after the birthday party.
Okay.
So by looking at that, I did the same thing. As I pulled up the timeline, and I have everything pulled up right now. But when it comes down to it, I mean, I totally understand where he's coming from on that. I mean, I think any parent, if that was a thing, they're going to go, and if there's even suspicion, they're going to go and cut people off right there. Just like, nope, don't even want to risk it, Now,
Anjum Alam mentioned on the last paragraph or two in that chapter 2, when I talked to him, has said that he was aware that they were isolating themselves or cutting people off. So he was aware of that, as he was one of those that was the victim, I think. David refused to pay insurance, I think, on the car, or didn't want to pay insurance. And that's what got the whole car. We're going to go get the car back because David didn't want to pay insurance. Anjum Alam was probably thinking, I give you this car. That was their car to give to David to use for him and his wife. And so you're not going to pay insurance of it. Well, how about we come up there and just get it back then? And, David, I think, stopped talking to them as well. So he knew those guys were isolating. But at the time, when everyone was thinking that David did this, that he was isolating himself because of some sort of mental illness, some sort of derangement, some sort of whatnot. But we know that David was eliminating bad people in his inner circle of friends and pulling away because he was starting to find out that they were not trustworthy. And so on purpose, because he had a high IQ, because he was intellectual, because he was smart, he was putting things together, not because he was mentally ill, but he knew better. Then he was starting to pull away, him and his family and his daughter, to start doing things. He wasn't, hanging out with the rest of the group. And his quote says, we're going to rehire and bring in some new people into the Gray State Project that are responsible, respectful, and trustworthy. That's
straightforward.
That was straightforward. In other words, throwing the existing Gray State members under the bus.
Yep.
And Dan Crowley Jr. was not related to the Gray State, was very good buddies and friends with them, and he cut off all communication with him. And this was all around the August timeframe. So it was all building up.
Well, and what's more is also, I mean, if you look at the journals too, now that we have that, it confirms everything that we already had thought, that David wasn't mentally ill. What it came down to is it was exactly as that post basically decreed. He is cutting people off because they're not trustworthy, because they're not reliable. And then you've also got the part when it comes to the alums. There was an issue with Komel and her family, and David's supporting his wife. So he's like, all right, we're just cutting them off. He's like, I'm cutting my side off, and for these reasons. So he details it pretty well in his journal that this is why they were cutting people off.
So it was, in other words, justified, and it was logical sequence of events the steps David was taking. And so those are all done by a reasonable person. Those are all steps taken by a logical person following clues and things that they were getting. And there was a cause and effect relationship that resulted in those cutoffs in a good way. He knew better that the walls were closing in, things weren't making sense.
Right.
Anything from Sophia or Greg?
Well, when you read David's journal, when he talks about the birthday party, he basically, and I'm paraphrasing here, he says, the typical stuff happened and that was expected, but basically the party was a hit. And so I don't know if anything happened between him and his brother on that particular day.
Yeah, we don't know. It was around that time, though, we don't know the dates, but it was around the birthday party that things started falling apart. I don't know if it was on the date itself or at the party itself, but it was something soon after. And we didn't find this out till I think the email around Christmas time or Thanksgiving time that Komel wrote to and exchanged with Allison, the sister, by saying, you know, I don't think we're going to Thanksgiving. Why would we? Would you? After what Dan Jr. did to David, what would you do? Would you want to get along with the family for holidays? Was really her tone.
Yeah.
You know, that's how bad it was, whatever took place. Whatever allegation was stated was that extreme that left David crying. I mean, so they started cutting off ties, and Allison, you know, played the card of not knowing what's going on. How come you guys aren't hanging out with us?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when Komel basically says on an email back in a response by saying, you don't need to be a genius to put two and two together here, Allison. You know as well as we do. You don't have to pretend that you don't know what's going on, but it's been very obvious.
Well, what's more too is, I mean, speaking on that same journal entry, he goes on to also say, it's Tuesday, August 5th at 7:58 p.m. We have been met with challenges of vampiric energy demand from dysfunctional relationships, friends, family. Everybody wants something, everybody needling in. And he goes on to go and start describing these people he's talking about.
And it is true, because it's like, was it Adam and Sean? They both were always begging to be taken along to California when he goes to work on the
Right.
film and everything. And Danny and August Mason and Joseph were always trying to talk about their expansion of Gray State universe and stuff. And David was getting pressure from everybody, and he's like, hey, cut it out. You know, I just want to work on my film. I want to work on my script and focus on my family. And you guys are trying to suck everything out of me.
I think that's a very accurate portrayal, Sophia, because that also goes along to tie in what I call the evidence of the contract being successful for the movie. These guys, all the people from the coattails now were jumping on. They wanted to ride David's coattails, David's success into Hollywood. These are the people, the same people saying that David never got the contract, David never got the deal. We know he did because we've got the evidence. We also know by the actions of these very same people. Everyone started coming in now that David got the deal, David got the contract. And that's when he started pushing up by saying, I imagine he's like, this really separates my so-called friends from my true friends, who's honestly there to help me versus the friends that are here to take advantage of me and my situation. And once he got that contract, which we know was July, I think, the birthday party's the next month. Everyone's now on David's coattails and now horning in on his life. That's when he started pulling back. I think the same time. So Sophia, you said it very, very well, that I think the success started taking off, and that's when people started becoming rude, asking for things. Hey, can I help? Hey, can I jump in? Hey, can I be part of this? Can we expand? Can we grow this deal? And it was that, you know, we find out later, it's the exact same month, I believe, or the following month, that he asks Danny August Mason to sign that release contract to say, no, we're not growing, we're not expanding. In fact, we need you to release your rights so I can move forward on this under my direction.
Well, what's interesting about that contract too is he was working with Adam Gleason like over a month prior, trying to get that all drafted up. So we know that he was trying actively to try and get Danny August Mason away from that project, if not making it so he's only going to be just there just to act.
Correct. Yeah, taking away the business side or his role as in management or as an officer or as a business associate, trying to cut the ties at that point already in July.
Right. And I think it was probably started anywhere between when they got back from that meeting. You could have even started during that meeting, in fact. Talks about this. Is there anybody else involved? Is you
Yep.
look at the contract. I mean, that could have screwed things over on the contract.
Well, yeah, it did sound like that was the straw that broke the camel's back. I think in David's life was actually winning that contract and being accepted, because everything fell backwards then as far as his family and friends and business partners.
Right.
Things all went to negative town very quickly after that, and then him and Komel and Rania were on cloud nine in the following subsequent months because everything was going so good.
Mm-hmm.
But we also get those various alleged texts from the father, David's father, we found out weren't true. And when he admitted to the fact that David said, "I didn't get the contract. I'm down in the dumps. I didn't get what I wanted." We know that's a lie. That's not true.
Yeah.
And now we also know that the texts that Dan Sr., the father, sent never existed either. There was no communication. There was no text between the father and son. And so now you raise the next question: why is lies being said? Why are lies being stated to police relating to a triple homicide? That would be your first indicator that something's not adding up. But I think this chapter is very, very important, although it's 2 pages, that it kind of sums up and ties everything around in a simple 2-page format for this chapter. It really brings out the wow factor that Andrew Malam wasn't making sense to him. He later was interviewed for that movie, the Gray State documentary, along with Sidra and Greg and myself. And they went through later after seeing the first review, first draft, and says, "Please take us out. We don't want to be involved in the documentary," which is really saying a lot, because now by that time, the information did come out. And I think at that point, William, to your point, he did change, and Anjum didn't buy any of this nonsense, especially when they were making a documentary trying to throw Komel under the bus and saying she's the one that started all this, and the drug use, the recreational drug use, the hallucinations, and these guys were nuts. And so him and Sidra said, "Pull us out of that. We don't want to be part of your documentary." And then the documentary makers had to go back and fill in some of those missing minutes to make it a 90-minute film again. And so they used some B-roll footage to fill it in, get some additional interviews.
Oh, they cut it too. They cut some of the footage
and release. Yeah. So they made some changes after that. So Greg and I were in from the very beginning and never once got to see a rough draft or a preliminary version of it or be in those talks at all when the film went final and, the final version came out. So, and we know that now is being used as pawns in the great scheme. That all makes sense now. Well, anything else, guys? I got to jump off in a few minutes here, but you guys can certainly stay on the call. Anything else for me before I jump off?
Well, what I also found was really interesting was the fact that they try to go and push all this, like, trying to say they're druggies, essentially. It's funny because if you go over the journal entries, David talks about trying to get out of that too. He's like, "Look, I'm trying to get off this." And so him purchasing more weed doesn't necessarily make sense, especially because that was months prior. And there's no communication between him and Chris Peck that entire time in between there. So
we still don't know if that whole drug deal, marijuana bag on the December 19th, "Hey, do you have any?" was even real.
It's not, and
those texts don't come up later once we got the text back of the full detailed log of the text on all those phone numbers that David had. None of those existed at 119. "Hey, do you have any?" That's fabricated as well.
I'm sure you guys probably know this trick now too as well, but like somebody can easily they can essentially text you, right, and just adjust your name through their contacts. That's all they'd have to do. So I think that's probably how they got that quote picture unquote. I don't think that's a legitimate thing at all.
No, there's no photo of, there's no proof,
right,
of this text going. Yeah,
there's no evidence to support that text took place, correct, or that they even went there that afternoon.
Hey Dan, before you go, I know you got to jump off here. Just I had like one question, maybe 2 questions about the conversation that you had. Did he offer anything, or was it just like you asked him questions and he just answered whatever questions you were asking him, or was he offering information that you found relevant without you having to ask?
I started off by just asking, introducing myself, asking a few questions, and he says, "Yes, I can." I said, "Can I ask you a few questions about the case? I don't want to take up too much of your time, but are you interested?" He goes, "Yes, I can answer. I can answer some questions." He had no problem with that, and a few things that he did offer on his own.
Okay.
But I had a few jotted down questions that I wanted to ask on my notepad, just in case he would call back, and certainly enough, he did. So I was able to ask those things, and I wanted to. Boy, what I wanted to do was stay on that call for an hour or two. Is what I would have loved to do. But what I wanted to do is get off in a certain number of time, not to make it too long, and I didn't want to make it sound like I was, digging but I did want to develop that relationship, and if by chance another call came down the road, or if we chatted more, or maybe did an interview on a show with him or something, I wanted to set and leave on a good slate. Keep it positive, keep it upbeat, and keep it short. Not to spend too much of his time, but I actually said, "Look, I got to run here in a few minutes, and it was nice talking to you. Hang in there, and hope everything goes well for you. And feel free to reach out," because we had each other's information. So I wanted to keep it fairly short, but make that introductory call just to let him know that we're there and we do have his back.
I actually
did he sound upset at any time? Was he pretty positive? Was like, what was, as far as the conversation, did you get any vibe from that? Was he upbeat? Was he downbeat, drained, et cetera, et cetera?
Here's what I got. He's a straightforward guy that got right to the crux of the answer. He didn't beat around the bush. He wasn't very talkative. He was a businessman who answered the questions, elaborated on a few things, and that was it. He did not seem happy. He did not seem mad. He sounded maybe exhausted and drained from everything that was going on in their life, but he sounded, I think the best word to be was appreciative of how I showed him respect. That we're just looking for answers. We are on his side, and I think that he was dealing with all the online conspiracy theories as well, and wanted to shut some of those up. So he was, I think, willing to talk and chat about some of these things to close the door on some of those other scenarios that were being thrown about.
And then lastly, did he sound upset when you guys were talking about Dan Jr.'s GoFundMe account?
I would have to say that's the only time that he really, if I could have him on video, would be the only time that he would have done a big eye roll. If I could just imagine him, what his comment was saying is like, "Oh, that thing, that the GoFundMe," he was not happy about that. And he's a very straightforward man of integrity. And so when he found out that a fundraiser was going on their behalf for the wife, when he never asked for help, they had insurance, they were getting by, they were doing things, but he seemed really let down when he found out that that was a big etiquette thing, I think, from their background, being how they were raised. They were Pakistani. That's something I think the way I took from that history, from that culture, is that something you do not do.
Makes sense.
And I think he was very, very put off that someone would go and do something like that. Very much turned off, especially when he says, I didn't know of the guy. He wasn't doing it as a family friend. He also didn't know Nyla. So why is he 1,000 miles away setting up this account on our behalf? And so he was put off by that. The rest of it, his conversation, I think, was very straightforward and very appreciative to get the answers, to make, to set the record straight on a few things.
I actually did have one question, if you can answer it real quick. Yeah. So the two numbers you called the one in his phone directory. I don't know if you've seen the phone directory I put together and everything, but
no.
I'll get you access to that so you can see what I've got. But I've got Anjum's number down, and I've got this other one, Kim Mission, who works at Vista Insurance. Did you happen to call that number?
I called a Vista number. I'm not sure which one. We can talk about it and chat off the air as well.
Absolutely.
But it was a Vista. Yes, that does make sense because that was where he was working. So one number was home, one was the Vista.
Gotcha. Okay, that's what I was thinking it was, which that explains is those conversations that David allegedly had with Anjum.
Oh, really?
Could have actually occurred then.
Okay. Good to know.
Because especially if he's calling that number, or rather that number was calling him, there were conversations with Kim Mission or
All
the
right.
Vista
Well,
Insurance.
let's talk about that off the air. That sounds very interesting. Thanks, guys, for your time. I got to jump off.
All right.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
See ya.
Thank you, brother.
Later.
Awesome.
Well, that is eye-opening now.
Why does that stand out to you? Fill us in here.
Okay, so now this is where this gets kind of interesting here. So if you were to go through the number timeline, let me go through right now. Kim Mission, you see her pop up one time, and it's David. And it's a text to Kim Mission at 3:50 p.m. at 10/23, 2014, and it's to Kim Mission, right? Which is the Vista Insurance. So if you were to look on the old timeline, there was actually plenty of conversation when it came to the old number timeline. In fact, I'll bring that up right now so I can just go and jump right to it. Mm-hmm.
Well, 10/23/2014.
Correct.
He texted that number.
Yep.
David did.
Yep.
That was after the car.
Right.
After Sidra came.
Right. And there's also on the old phone number is actually when there was a lot more conversation going on between those two, even in the late hours.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm bringing it up right now, so I'll be able to actually give you exact. Let me see.
Well, do you have the option to share screen here? I don't really know.
I mean, I can.
Okay.
I just give me a second.
Okay.
There we go. This should be fine to share right here. Here we go. Okay. Why isn't it? Go window. Here we go. This should work. There we go. And should be right here. Is that popping up?
Yes, I see it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's a trip right there.
The Matrix popped up, but yes.
So if you were to go and look for Kim Mission, you can see there's 12 of them, and this is just what I've got so far. I haven't even completed the old number directory or old number timeline yet, but you can see this pops up a lot.
Can you maximize this just a little bit so we can? It's showing. I mean, I'm looking at a very small monitor, so yes.
Okay. Yeah, as you can see it right here, there's 12 times it shows up. So we can go through by date what I've got so far. And you can see that they pop up pretty frequently, all the way up until you got the 7/8/2014. I mean, like I said, I'm still not done. You can see right here, still not done. It goes up until July 16th, who I've got currently. But even then, there's still time in between where I'm still working on. See, as it jumps from January to April and April to July. Looking up important things, right? And so this is interesting to me because then you're seeing that, but then you also see, if you were to go and look up Anjum, you see him actually pop up too. So that's my question is, I mean, if that's what's going on, that adds a whole lot more because now you've got two numbers for Anjum. So now you can see.
Are we sure that the other number isn't Sidra's? Because I thought that she also worked at Vista for a while.
In a sec, I don't want to share this. I don't want to show the directory.
Do you want me to stop the screen sharing for a minute?
I can do it. There we go. And let me go bring that up real quick. So Sidra, if we were to
this
go
is cool.
over
So you can screen share, and all I have to do is sit here. Cool. I like it.
So for Sidra, I do have her number in here, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, it's right here. So that's the 254 number. Yeah, it's all alphabetized, so you can see it. But if you want to go and take a look right now, just to confirm it, because I could have sworn that is it. I mean, when I went through, I ended up having to go and ensure that these are in fact these people's numbers, or these businesses and all this. So I went through and it's pretty well vetted. I'll put it that way. I can get you access to the receipts so you can see what I'm talking about. But yeah, I've got, I went through and I had to go and find out whose numbers are these. And sure enough, some of the numbers I had that they were unknown, I didn't find a whole lot on. I started going through and background checking these numbers, just reverse lookups, all this. Whose numbers are these? And then you look at the time frame, like, holy crap. So, but this Kim Mission is one that pops up here. So for Vista Insurance, that's why I was like, okay, well, that's why I need to go and confirm with Dan, make sure that's the number he was calling. So if it was that number, then it's a whole other bag of worms here.
Nice.
So,
and Will, also, can you make sure to tell people where they can find you? Because this is what I love about what you do, is what every researcher should be doing, but you do it in real time and you do it live on Twitch. We just start going through different things, and it's like, it's just great because it helps new people. It helps me. There's so much. My memory is really, really bad, so that's why I love doing the video. That's why I wrote this book. But that's why I love Catherine and Sophia. They've been covering a lot of great stuff too, and I just love watching all of your guys' streams here because it gets my mind going. It takes me back to what I thought that I know, and who knows, it may change some of my thoughts or help me grow to help me get to the truth. But the way that you do it on Twitch is really fascinating because it seems like it's like live time research.
That's all it is.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I want people to go and see the same thing I'm seeing so they can see how I found it. They can use that themselves for, let's say they're working another case. Now you can use the same type of methods. But at the same time, you're able to see how I came to these conclusions. So it's one of those things that people can't really deny. Oh, well, how'd you find this out? Well, now you see directly how I did it. You can't really deny the facts. So it's all about shutting down, naysayers, as we'll just refer to them as. I mean, we all know I refer to them as a special name. So, right, Sophia?
You only have one name, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, she who will not be named. Voldemort.
You shall not pass.
Yeah.
Okay.
Judamort. Just watch. She's gonna pop up in chat in like 3, 2, 1.
Not in this chat.
Yeah, probably not. But yeah, no, it's one of those things. I feel that there's so many naysayers out there, and there's so many new people coming in. They see that, and they're able to see the facts. It's hard to deny it if you see directly how somebody's getting to it. You can go and you can check it yourself. But at the same time, it's like, is there any point to checking it? You're seeing directly what I'm typing. You see directly what is being laid out in front of you. Isn't it the same conclusion anybody would just draw? I was like, well, this guy's basically doing research in real time.
Yeah.
It would be like if I was doing it or this guy was doing it, So, but yeah, anybody can find me on Twitch. You can look up twitch.tv/strange investigations. Rumble, BitChute, Odyssey, TikTok. You can look me up by Strange Investigations. And on YouTube, you just have to look me up by William Rail. Unfortunately.
Yeah, I know you're not very active on your YouTube, but I've been restreaming a lot of your stuff on my YouTube, and it's doing pretty well, actually.
Well, and the stuff
So
like on
thank you.
YouTube, like I have a bunch of different videos I'm working on right now. I have one that I'm doing on child sacrifice right now. It's been taking up a lot of my time. And then on top of that, I've got the death of the family video, which is covering this entire case. But I just recently, I was just telling people on my stream last night that I'm going to have to break up a bunch of things in there. Just going over police reports, for instance, that's going to take up a long time because there's a lot of valid information, but to show the connections and how everything is connected, like for instance, just like what I was talking about last night, I was looking at the Becker Nelson report. There was 2 reports from that person, but there's so much information in there that now you can go in do a little digging on what's said, because what's said on there, it mentions Judy and the gun, looking through the front window, the phone or the 911 phone call. You've got, the Lorraine Tuppy mentioned. I mean, you've got all sorts of people mentioned, so you can actually see where everything goes and how it all ties in.
Yeah.
So that's why I figured, well, yeah, I got more content coming, but it's just, and they're because they're going to be broken down. We're looking at probably about a 5-10 minute video per police report, most likely, you know. So,
Yeah.
you know,
And
it's a little more beneficial.
Sophia, you and Catherine have been working on some great videos recently too. I know you just put out the one about blood, which I found fascinating. It really got my mind going, obviously, which is what I
Mhm.
do. So you can tell sometimes I text or I comment in real time, maybe not knowing what I'm talking about and everything. But these are just questions that I'm asking. But that's
Ye-
it's a fascinating series.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was the official first part of this series. She has a second part where
Mhm.
we go over all the blood that wasn't tested. And then after, well, no, the second part is the rest of the blood that was tested. And then we're going to go over the blood spatter that was at the crime scene that was never tested. And that is extremely revealing, and it disproves the narrative completely.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we have to break it up into bite-sized pieces because the information is overwhelming and it's so much.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Well, this is when we think about this, and all of us here, everyone in the chat, everyone here on this panel should always be thinking about this. When we are able, when we get to the point where we can make a real film on this, a documentary that really covers everything, as I plug in my laptop here so it doesn't die. These are the things that we need to be thinking about. What do we include? How do we? I mean, there's so much. I mean, Will, you were talking about, you break it down from a 4-hour thing or whatever.
Yeah.
There's just so much data, and it's very important. What do you include? What do you not include? Is this going to end up like a missing 411 series where you're just going to have to write 20 books and have 20 different films on this stuff? I mean, there's so much here for what really should be a very simple case. If we didn't have, let's say we didn't have any other documents, any of the photos, anything, right? The police and certain friends and certain family make it seem very simple that David Crowley is guilty.
Well, see, I got to thank Sophia on this one because she led me toward the Pencock case. At this point, I would be just addressing, okay, well, look how quickly they just said, no, David did it. And then look how they took their time and they were able to successfully solve the Pencock case. Now, I'm still looking for a prior homicide to David's death that those same detectives got on. Because then we've essentially got our, I don't want to say control and experimental, but we've got things we can compare to. Mm-hmm. So we can see, okay, well, how did they handle this case prior to David? How did they handle this case after? So why is it so terrible in between? Because I'm sure it's exactly how it's going to fall. They did really well, good, effective work on a case prior, and we know they did on the Pencock case. Why did they fumble the ball so much on this one? Well, and I'm sure they probably got some stupid excuse like, "Oh, it was so cold." You're in Minnesota. Get used to it. If you're not, too bad.
Well, that Pennock case came afterwards, right? So maybe they learned from the David Crowley case. Maybe they learned.
See, I don't think that's the case.
The thing about the Pennock case is that they didn't even call out the BCA. They didn't take samples. They didn't do anything. They just said, "Oh, it's a murder-suicide. Here we go," and
they
took
still
photos.
missed a bullet or 2 bullets, right?
Yeah, well, maybe if they called out BCA, they could have found them.
Right.
But
yeah.
Just
and
so I have
honest,
nothing to compare from the BCA to that case, and I would love to have a different case from Apple Valley so that we could compare. But
right.
Yeah,
we've got that, then we can see before and after, and then why did they fumble? Like I said, I'm like 99% sure that's the case. And so why is there so much fumbling?
Yeah, and I just want to say hi to Green Eggs and to Andrea, and we're kind of in the after hour show here and the post show or whatever. So if anyone in the chat has any questions or any comments that you'd like to make, please feel free to go ahead and make those comments, and I'm sure William and Sophia will be able to offer their thoughts on that. Just want to throw that out there for
Just one
anyone.
quick thing for you as well, Greg.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. It should be a simple case, and we should be able to just, here's like an hour block or 2 hours, and here you go. But the thing is there's so much information just because of the characters involved. You've got the family and friends, which we can prove there is either they have just absolutely god awful memories or they're lying. And that's what it comes down to on a lot of the stuff here. So, I'm not necessarily saying they're lying, but I'm not necessarily saying they're not. But we can prove a few things here. Chris Beck, did he actually have a conversation with David on December 19th? No, he did not. Did David's dad have a conversation with him about the movie? I don't believe so. If I'm not mistaken, I could have sworn. Let's see, when was that supposed to take place? I was like,
It was in November.
Yeah, then there
like
is no
the
way.
second week of November.
Yes,
Yeah,
there's no
that
contact
one
from Dan Senior at all.
That one's weird because of how that one was kind of laid out with Dan. It was like it was something written. The whole thing was really, really weird. It made, and I find this with both of David's parents, they're so compartmentalized in this thing. From what I've found here, is that you have this isn't like this is coming straight from Dan Senior to the cops. This is coming from Dan Senior being filtered by Dan Jr.
Right.
And then given to the cops. Why are the cops doing that? Why do they let that? I just don't understand some of the things on. It's like everybody just wants to get this over with. They don't want to talk about it. They don't really want to get to the bottom here. They just want to, they're going through the motions, but they're not investigating on either side here. And then when they get called out on stuff, they just either don't answer questions, they don't respond to what Sophia and Catherine have sent them, or what other people may have sent them either. And it's just there's just so much left. They leave so many doors open, and then at the same time they're wondering why people still have so many different questions. I mean, this case should be simple. It should have been closed. Really, it shouldn't have been closed. What this case should be is a cold case. That's what this really is. We should just say, you know what? We don't know who did this. We don't know what happened. We don't have any proof that David did this, so we're just going to keep it open. But they're not doing that. They're not, at least openly, maybe in the background.
Let me check that letter again, because if I remember correctly, the city attorney in the second letter said this type of case is not actually closed.
Correct. Yeah. No, it can't be closed because they don't have what they would need to close this case. But unfortunately, that's why people like us and everyone in the chat and everybody who cares about this case is such a big threat, because we're the ones who are keeping this case open. We're reminding people the case is not closed.
Right.
This is not a double murder suicide. You can think it is. You can believe it is. That's fine. That doesn't make it true. When we look at what is truth, it is not true that this is a double murder suicide. That's why Eric Nelson's film was so powerful, because of what it didn't tell us, because people were expecting that. They were expecting for Eric Nelson to have that smoking gun to prove us all wrong. And when that didn't happen, it backfired. Yeah. And it's just like, you guys should have never made the movie.
Yeah, no, the movie was it was a problem because it proves nothing. If anything, I would dare say that it actually proves the point home that they weren't crazy. That this definitely was, if anything, it was a homicide, because you see all the areas they're covering up.
Yeah, and you can look at the movie Soaked in Bleach, which I thought was a great film. And they use other hit pieces to show how those were hit pieces. They're lining us up for that. They're lining us up to make a great film on this case, a documentary, a real documentary, a truth documentary on this David Crowley case. They've given us everything, everything that they could possibly give us, and I don't understand why. It's that they put it in our lap here, and it's not just us. The alternative media that has completely failed people and has really opened up my eyes to my gut feelings way back when have been confirmed by a lot of the people who should be tackling this case.
Right.
It is such a simple case. And they're just not. Either they don't know about it, they don't want to go there. I don't understand it. I really don't get it, why there's not more of the alternative media that are tackling this case. It's such a slam dunk case. Only if they don't know about it, then I can understand it. But a guy like Alex Jones knows about it.
Yep.
Adam Kokesh knows about it.
Yeah,
A
they
lot of these
don't
other
like me as
people.
well. Kokesh doesn't really like me a whole lot. I have sent him numerous messages.
Have you
I've
heard
called him out.
Kokesh? Did you
Oh,
heard him? Show me where you heard him. Where did you hear him?
Point to the area you heard him. His head and his heart.
Okay.
And destroyed his soul. But no, I mean, it's, I've poked the bear a few times on some of these guys. Kokesh and what's the other guy? Rudkowski or whatever his name is. I've poked both of them, and I even called Rudkowski out on Sean Wright. Why are you saying this guy's such a great guy when this is what he's doing to this case here? This is supposed to be his friend. This is somebody who is supposed to be a quote unquote truth seeker. He's not. And I have questions about, like I said, some of those guys there, like some of the team, because you've got all these Gray State guys. You've got Adam Shambor, who is making these really strange calls the day, like I think it was the day of, and like on the 15th in 2015 on January, that he knows they're just going straight to voicemail. Why is he making these calls? He doesn't call the month prior, doesn't call the month prior to that. He doesn't call after David gets his new phone. So the question is, how did he get the number, for one? For two, why didn't he try and call him earlier? And then you've got Hendricks, who's claiming he had a phone call conversation with David in December. Let me bring up that exact date so I can call that directly. He says on December 2nd, David allegedly had a phone conversation with Mason Hendricks. Mason Hendricks appears once, and it's only, from what I can see so far, in the old phone number timeline, not on the new one at all. And I've gone over phone calls and texts, and there's nothing from Mason Hendricks in the new one. And the thing is, if you look at how the police word things too, they will say it's a Facebook message if it's a Facebook message. They'll say it's social media. They'll say something along this. Instead, they go out of the way to say text message on some of these things too, which is really, really bizarre because they clearly know the difference. And that's what happened with Chris Peck. They literally said it was a text message. There is no text message from Chris Peck.
I did pull up that letter from the city attorney. It's bullet point 1. It says, the Apple Valley PD released a packet of information in approximately November 2015 after the Apple Valley PD finished reviewing the available evidence of the incident and informed Dakota County Attorney's Office that the Apple Valley PD could not recommend anyone to charge with homicide. However, under Minnesota statute 628.26 parentheses A, homicide can be charged at any time after the death. So the Apple Valley PD retains the data in case further investigation is warranted. Because of a homicide can be charged well into the future, a homicide investigation never really closes.
Well, that just basically says, okay, so that's just the city attorney. I mean, that's a good sign right there. That says the case isn't closed yet.
Yeah.
That this is something that's open. They are looking at as a homicide investigation, at least that they're looking from that standpoint as well, which means they haven't ruled out that it was a triple homicide yet. That's the good thing about what that's saying there. So,
oh yeah, I mean, that's why when they ruled the case, quote unquote, exceptionally cleared, that is not saying the case is closed.
Right.
So, I mean, there's so much to that. I wish I could put that up on screen here.
And then she goes on to talk about how they had forged the document or the forgery, and then how I had sent into Apple Valley PD the evidence of the forgery and the manipulation of the Apple Valley PD's data in this case. in the event future circumstances reveal someone appropriate to be charged with performing or assisting in the homicides, the manipulated data may make it difficult to successfully prosecute. A defense attorney would naturally call the entire investigation into question because of the data tampered with by third parties.
And I
Yeah,
call
but
BS on that attorney.
that's if they have someone. That's if they were trying to prove David Crowley guilty. But in this case, they can't because he's dead, right?
Correct.
Well, even
So-
if they did arrest somebody in the future for their murders, the
But if-
defense attorney could have issues or could bring this in.
Not if the yes, I totally understand that. I get what you're saying, but if the prosecution could tie the fake document to that person, then the defense would probably not even want that document to be
Right.
to be brought out. So I get what they're saying, and it's great the way that it's phrased because it sounds like they're giving you, like almost like
Oh.
they're not even giving you anything about this particular case, almost as if maybe they don't understand the particulars of this case. I don't know. But when they talk about that fake document, it's like I don't see how the defense would, only if they're trying to tie the document to the defendant or something. I guess there's a lot of speculation in that.
Let me finish the paragraph because there's more information. And
Okay.
it says the Apple Valley PD must protect the data and cannot risk any more of the data being compromised. And so that's why they're not releasing anything else, is because they're afraid of security information being compromised.
Right.
Well, I'm
And
kind of jealous that they responded to you, but not to me. I'm still waiting.
well, get
What's up
this
with
too.
that?
Now, this is the interesting part with that too, because then you've got that conversation from some naysayers, and we get to see some back and forth. The one where we have to read from bottom to top, and we get to see that they are discussing. And he's like, "Well, I did." They're basically trying to allude that, okay, well, why did you forge this? Essentially, and he's like, I didn't do that. It's like, but you did. It looks like now. So.
That's what we were hoping that they would look at, right? Is, hey,
He's still
you
been
guys,
awfully silent.
you guys have these people that are claiming to have forged it, then you have people that are claiming that they didn't. Let's get some clarification on that. It doesn't sound like they're going to be able to, or at least at this point, the Apple Valley City, it doesn't see any reason to go there. They're just more protected. They're doing a CYA. Is that right?
Well, I don't even think that they would tell me if there was an ongoing investigation in regards to that.
No, they confirmed it. That letter.
Well, in the
confirm
first letter, letter they did,
Mhm.
but
and that's the good thing we're going to have to take from this is that they're still looking.
Can you make those public, Sophia?
Greg,
if you need to redact
in 16 days, I'll be
things,
happy to make it public. I can't do it right now.
16 days. That is cryptic. What is 16 days?
It's when I get out of Facebook jail.
Oh wait. Okay. I'm gonna say yeah. We can wait for you. I suppose I do have them.
And you could send them over to us if you're okay with that. I'd love to put them on my website, at least for people that want to look at it. But
it's up to Sophia.
Yeah,
I do have it, Greg. I sent it to you months ago.
All right.
Yeah, it's probably buried in my
Control F, my friend. Control F.
Okay. So I have no excuses. All right, I'll go find it.
You have no excuses, sir.
I want
None.
I want the original document. I want the best.
Mail it to me.
The original document was emailed to me.
Or else it's fake, or else it's no.
Oh yeah, totally. Well, there are certain people saying that all this is fake.
Oh yeah,
that the Apple Valley City.
Judah Morts.
I mean, all they have to do is call them and find out. But
I mean,
okay.
the affidavit is very real. And why in the world would
Isn't
we
it?
fake a document and then send it to Apple Valley for verification? I mean, that's just the
Please
mental
arrest me.
gymnastics on that one is hilarious.
I mean, people that are okay with faking documents are pretty quick to call other documents fake and call other things fake.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
I've
Judah
seen
Mort
that for
Holmes
years and
versus
years
us,
and years.
Justice Moriarty's.
But it's all
Well,
there. It's all there. Yeah, go ahead.
just take my personal information out of the letters, please, before you
Yeah,
post them.
yeah. If you could resend that to me, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, I'm going to.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so that way people can read it. You can read the whole document. I'm sure we could do a whole bonus show just on that document. I think you did a great job of pretty much right here reading the whole thing to let people know exactly what is going on here. And that no, the case is not closed. It cannot be closed.
Well,
And
there's suspicion that there was murder. That's all it takes for this case to stay open like that.
Well, see
The police
the
have
difference.
suspicion.
Sorry, I'm talking over you.
Sorry about that.
The difference between the first letter and the second letter. The first letter, it was, basically the case is. There's a tone difference between the first letter and the second letter. Like something had changed, and you'll see it when you read it. It's very interesting because now they're talking about murders. They're talking about homicide.
Bingo.
That wasn't in the first letter at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh, okay, this is interesting.
I think it's because they're seeing the same thing. They probably have some newer investigators in on this. Probably a new lawyer. We'd have to go and look and check. Because I think it's a newer district attorney. So I mean, this case is being looked at then by a new attorney, and they're saying, wait a second, that means the other attorney was just kind of like, let's just sweep this under the rug, get it out of here. That's probably what was occurring, but that's my guess, at least. Is I don't know if this is the same district attorney that was on during this case when it first opened up.
I'm really hoping that they're getting the state involved in the investigation.
Oh, I'm sure they will, because I mean the thing is they brought BCA in, so there's going to be, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that's the whole state, if I'm not mistaken. So get the BCA involved now that's they're bringing in some other guys for some like forensics and all this kind of stuff. I mean, now they're seeing, okay, well, this could possibly be homicide here, huh? Just triple homicide. Okay.
sounds like all they need is a 93-minute film that will kind of push them
done
down the line there.
Good luck fitting this case in 93 minutes.
Well, and like I said, 93. Hey, I could do it. 93 minutes. I will. That'll be my time for that YouTube video. With those parts cut out now. 93 minutes. That's where I'm aiming for now.
Okay, well, I'm gonna have to head out soon. But
No
anyway.
All right.
Well, thank you. Really appreciate you joining us. Yeah. And we'll go a couple more minutes.
I can't wait for the next blood analysis. That was first one was good.
Yeah, the first one was awesome.
The second one's going to be even better. The third one might be even more.
It kind of seemed like I was trolling in there, but really what I was just doing is just asking questions that I was thinking about. So I hope people didn't misinterpret that or anything.
No, that's okay.
That's okay.
They're legit questions. It's just...
And these are coming from someone who doesn't know anything about DNA. If there's DNA and then there's blood DNA on top of it, does one override the other, et cetera, et cetera? How does all of that work? So obviously, it triggered me to think, you know what, I need to learn more about the DNA process. But anyways, I hope people understand that it's just questions, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
To read those questions you're asking, I mean, it's going to definitely be eye-opening for those that are new to the case, and in some cases, some of the vets, that have been looking at this case for some time. maybe they haven't looked at that, so I think that's a really good thing.
Yeah. So Sophia, before you go, do you do you know when part 2 is coming out?
You guys have no idea how much. I mean, we're putting in so much time. We're
We
so
may
close
have.
to.
I think maybe William and I have some idea.
Yeah, I would say so.
We may have a guesstimate.
I think with Catherine's second part, it should be out within the next week and a half or so. The other ones, probably in the next month, because we're very, very close to finishing. It's just the areas that have a ton of blood spatter on the wooden floors.
Right.
It's the photographs are such poor quality that when you're looking and trying to distinguish, like all the different movements and everything, it's taking time and it's very frustrating. So we get burned out very quickly. But we only have a few more actual crime scene photos to go over. And then we're applying the arrows and stuff like that to show direction, to show the movement that was going on when the attacks were happening. So we're really trying to show receipts.
Right.
And that it just takes time because it's a lot of work.
And are there going to be any cat cameos in this one? Because I didn't see any in the last one.
The only reason why there wasn't any in the last video was because the dog was out.
Oh, gotcha.
And
the natural enemy.
Yeah.
So I was gonna say, you have dogs and cats. That's a
right. Yeah. But I have a puppy.
Enemy siblings. I know a thing or two about that one.
He wants to play with the cats so badly. He was whining because he wanted to play with them so badly, and the cats are just like, nope.
Poor puppy. Okay.
But,
it's like an older sibling and a younger sibling. Exactly.
Yes. And they are older. They're almost 10, 12 years older than him. So
oh, dang. Okay.
They have no interest in that dog.
Probably glare at him from afar the whole time.
Yeah, they do.
Oh,
they really do. They're like, if you could just go away, that would be great.
Right.
I mean, we send them to puppy daycare, so they're grateful for that.
No, that's fair.
But anyway, Greg, whenever you have time to go over that other thing.
Yeah, I'll definitely stay in contact with you with that. Hopefully tonight, maybe this week or something. I don't know. Everything's just so crazy right now.
Okay, sounds great.
All right, thank you, my friend. It's a crazy, crazy world. It's a wild world, as Cat Stevens said. So
yeah,
it's a mad world. As Tears for Fears stated.
Wow, yeah. Well, can't go wrong with Tears for Fears.
Absolutely not. Except the new stuff. It sucks.
I haven't heard any of their new
stuff.
Sucks.
That's all I'm going to say. I am not a fan. Their older stuff was fire right there. Good stuff.
Well, Will, what did you think about everything? I mean, some of the things, I guess, just to kind of recap on the show that we did here today. This was a very, I mean, you guys, I don't know if either of you have ever read this before Dan read. I thought he did a really good job at reading this here too. It was only two pages, did not have any of my commentary or really anything in it. I thought, going back looking at it, I thought it was a little challenging to read because there's quotes within quotes. So it's like it's me writing the book and then I'm quoting Dan Hennen and then he's quoting Komel's dad. So at some points I'm like, man, I wonder if people are really gonna understand who is quoting who here,
Right.
because this was all based on, and that was probably the one thing that I didn't get to ask Dan Hennen is where can people find these notes? Because I think they're on his website. So if you go to uglytruth.info, you should be able to find those notes somewhere. I hope those notes are out there publicly, but all that I did is take some of the most important things and put them into this chapter. And it was a little weird to have, this is the shortest chapter. This is 2 pages. That's it. There's nothing else there. So 2 pages, and I'm like, okay, like, because I was thinking, okay, should I add my own commentary? Should I? But I thought it's didn't need it. It just, people need to just, when they read this book, the goal of this book is for them to just really get this data and just try to interpret it however they want to. So I really try to keep my personal feelings and my personal views and everything out of it until the very, very final chapter. This one was very challenging because it was 2 pages, and I'm like, wow, this is really, really small. There's not much there. Did I capture everything that was in Dan Hennen's notes? And that's why talking with him, it's like I feel like there was a lot more maybe I should have included in this book, in this chapter. But I felt like I did, I was able to kind of grab some of the more important things. And even looking back, it's like these things are kind of not in the right order. It's not in order. Okay, first Dan Hennen said this, then Komel's dad said that. It's really not that. It was the most important things that I found relevant. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on just reading this chapter overall?
So I mean, I've loved the book. I'll put it that way. But I thought this chapter was interesting. I did find it a little weird too about the quotes within the quotes within the quotes.
Yeah, it was hard to follow. It was hard to follow today. Yeah.
I mean, but it's at the same time, I definitely had some highlighted in here. It was pretty heavy highlighted areas in there. Especially the time when Dan had spoken with him for the length of time. I thought that was a good thing. He notated that because then we got to see how long was this conversation. Are we talking hours? Are we talking, like a quick 5-minute conversation? But no, he's like, no, it's 37 minutes. This is what we talked about. So we get that laid out. And he shows he has interest in taking a look at this case still, which I thought was really, really fascinating, because if you go off of a gray state and you go off of what the naysayers are saying, you go off of what all these people online that are just convinced David did this, anytime the alums are brought up, it's just, no, they fully align with the narrative, and that's what they're going to go with. And they're kind of like the same as Dan Crowley, right? But then you get this and you're just like, wait a second, he would still be interested in looking at this case further because he doesn't feel the police did a good job.
Right.
So I thought it was really interesting. Plus, on top of that, talking about the Dan Crowley fund that was put up. So let's be honest, my thoughts are, I mean, it's looking at when did this get shut down, and then did he just take that money, maybe spend some money of his own, and then just use this to replenish his account for that.
I mean, even that $6 million, like, where do you get this number from? Like, you just pull a random number out of your ASS or something.
Yeah,
I mean, it makes
exactly
no sense to me. Where did this number come from? And here's the other thing. The other point was that Dan made it clear. Hey, Dan spoke with Komel's father and said, "Hey, if you want us to help you, we will." Dan Jr. never did that. Mm-hmm. He never went to Komel's dad and said, "Hey, hey man, I know your wife is going through this, and I'd love to help her." He didn't do that, as far as we know. It's just like, it's just a weird thing. I don't understand.
Do we have proof of his charitable donations? So I don't think we do. And if we don't have proof of this, did it actually happen?
As far as the 8,000 you're talking about, the 8,000 raised, I think with GoFundMe, I think you can see like it, how much has been raised, right? So that's kind of what that 8,000 number,
right?
That's
but
what
then
that's
cashing it out,
and he was questioned about where did the money go to, And
Yeah.
no, we don't have any answer. And I think even when I spoke with Komel's friend, I don't even think she even knew if that $8,000 where it went to. It should have went to Komel's family,
All I gotta
obviously.
say is Vegas isn't exactly cheap, and there was that.
No, but they're not. But I mean, I get that, but the Crowleys are not.
They've got money.
They've got money. They've got money. So they don't need to raise money. That was another issue. It's like, why are you even doing this? Who prompted you to do this?
Right.
You did not need to do this. Now, the other thing that I wanted to mention about David's brother, when David changed his phone number in October of 2014, David's brother was the first one of his family that got his new number.
How do
So
we know that?
because it's in the documents. That's another thing that is in the same thing that Dan Crowley Jr. wrote to the police.
Oh, that one, the one where he compiled the data and just took
Correct.
yeah.
Correct.
So
So
we go
based
off
on that,
yeah,
based on that, correct. Thank you for correcting me, by the way.
that's all good.
Based on that, he got the number first, and David's dad was asking about that number, and David's dad got the number from him, from Dan Crowley Jr.
Right.
So that's a whole nother thing, and that's where the phone records matter, because who is calling who was the first one after David got his new number, who was the first one from David's family that David called, texted, or somebody called him.
Well, see, my thing is, like, why didn't Allison just text him or call him? We don't see that either.
Because she didn't have, she may not have had his number.
Well, exactly.
They had email, but
that's my point with it.
The phone records, and I'm sure you can do this since you have those records, probably more handy than anybody else. out of all of David's side, who was the first one with David's new phone number? What was the first communication? Did David call or text?
To David, it was an unknown number. David then texted an unknown number. I have to look at these numbers here again, and as I've got a lot more data now on who these unknowns possibly could have been. But after that, it's Zach Carter got a text from David.
Okay, but I'm saying, as far as David's brother, sister, father, mother.
That's the great thing about my Control F feature. Do we see Dan Jr. pop up before November? No, we don't see him at all. He pops up in November.
Okay,
and so then we don't. And that's the thing. You look up just the word Dan. His dad would also pop up into this directory if he was there. He's not there. So who else do we see? We see Catherine. She got the number. And that was in 1023. Her and Komel spoke.
That's pretty early. That's pretty early.
Right. That's like right after they got their new phones.
Okay.
Catherine got it. We don't see the alarms at all.
No, because they're going to be the last ones from my view, because they were paying for the old phone numbers. So David's trying to transfer, and he's still having the old phone number transfer to his new phone number. It's things like that. There's some weird transferring going, or call forwarding or something like that going on, that David's using or trying to use. I think
he'd been using it since January of the previous year, at least. So I mean, this whole, what was it? I'm trying to remember the exact name. It was not, I don't think it was CC Coin. Could have been CC Coin. No, it was Dolores Dixon. That was the number that the name that pops up when you look up the number, but it's, after looking into it, I've even called it. It's a call forwarding service.
Yeah.
So this whole Dolores Dixon, it's just that's maybe somebody that owns a call forwarding service, possibly. But still, end of the day, you're seeing a whole lot of that going on. But it's not like David was like shutting off. They were still talking to people. He was still texting back and forth with Zach. You know, there was the other one I found was really weird was Komel and the Scott Hussaby. If you look up Scott Hussaby, he's an attorney over in for like who deals with like wills and divorce and all this. And I looked at this, but I mean, he deals with all sorts of different things. So it's kind of weird how it works. Could it be a divorce kind of conversation? I don't think it was. You know, and
He
I know
does like
Sophia
Private
actually mentioned
Eye, I
this,
think, or a lot of other things too.
right? But Sophia actually brought it up to me about the connection with that journal, Komel's alleged journal. All she did was basically just copy from, I think it was a textbook or something. Sophia would know better than I would, but
Yeah, it was like a study. It was almost like she was doing like a study thing where, hey,
right,
this is what you. It's like a kind of like a study Bible is what it looked like to me, where you take
right.
these lessons and you kind of apply them to your own.
But the thing is, I mean, I'd like to get a hold of it so I could see, because I'm pretty sure even that was copied. What was being described, what everybody's trying to say that described as, oh, this is David. I would like to see is if that is the case, and that she just literally copied that as like the example in the book, for instance. And people are just like, well, that's David right there. That's David. That's who she's describing here. That's not a journal. That looks like it's more like study sheets. Could this have been stuff from like her college days?
Right.
You know, which I mean, it's still likely. I mean, I still have some of my college stuff that I had. You know, not a whole lot of it, but it's like, you know, I mean, sometimes it just you happen to hold on to it.
There was a lot of articles written, Rolling Stones and something else, and it's a book by Pamela Hagg, and it's called Marriage Confidential and the Traditional Marriage. And literally everything that, all the key points that were in those 2 pages were taken directly out of those articles.
Right.
Or / book. And so and that was from 2011. That's when everything hit the news circle or circuit, was June 2011. Yeah. October 2011. So, I mean, but yeah, it's just almost word for word. So, and the other thing is David's name is never mentioned. They don't discuss Ronnie at all. I think that would be an issue if she was thinking about leaving. I mean, at least one thing. But so it's very suspect.
And that's my thing is, maybe did she just go to like a Barnes and Noble or something and see it? I mean, could she have just gone to a bookstore and just?
We don't know when it was written, number one.
Right.
Number two, if they had just picked up like a magazine at a doctor's office or seen it on the newsstand and looked at it, they could get that information from that.
Right.
And number three is we don't even know if she wrote it. There's nothing suggesting that. Her name's not on it. She doesn't discuss David, like I said. So we have no clue where it was written, why it was written, when it was written, who wrote it. Nothing. We're just given something and told to trust them.
Absolutely, which is a problem, especially when discussing this type of a thing. So, I mean, we can definitely go over the handwriting. We can do a quick handwriting analysis. I mean, I looked at it briefly, and it does match from what I remember. It does match her handwriting. But
well, I mean, here's the reason why we never even really went there. Why it wasn't that big of a thing is because Komel made it very, very clear. If anyone who watched the last podcast that we did, Komel made it very clear, or Komel's sister made it very clear that the police looked in that journal and didn't find anything. There was nothing in Komel's journal that had any relevance, basically. So, I mean, it's one of those things where it's not even, it's just like people are just continually, it seems like, trying to take us down this rabbit hole or a distraction, all these different things to make sure that we don't focus on these relevant things. And that's why it's so important to focus on
Well,
what do these documents say.
and here's why I have an issue with that, is because they talk about David's journal and saying how there's nothing of relevance for
That's
that.
right.
But
Right.
they never mention Komel's journal.
100%.
Well, that's because it's not even relevant to even mention.
But they mentioned David's, and they said there was no
Right.
relevance to the case. So
Correct,
why not
because that's
mention
it.
Komel's?
Because
Saying,
there's
oh, well,
even less relevance.
okay, but consistency. I mean, that's why I take huge issues into just trusting what people say without receipts.
Oh, sure. But I mean, if there's anyone that would say that there is any relevance to it, we have the police who don't even really recognize it. We have
Yeah.
Komel's sister who says that there is no relevance. Why would anyone claim that there is any relevance to it? There really
Those
isn't.
who are desperate for David to be guilty.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
When it, taking out of context, I mean, like I said, we have no idea who wrote it, when it was written, what the real intent of it was for, whether it was a class notes or class project or
Right.
what. So,
Yeah,
anyway.
the one thing we can for sure always confirm is it was written after 2011, or at least at 2011 in May, when it first came out.
Yeah, I'm thinking fall of 2011 is maybe when it was written and
was
notes
written in
were
May.
taken.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Yeah.
That's so.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's very, very curious to say the very least. And it's like, it's brought up, as something that was not, it wasn't relevant, but it was still, it's something that the other group likes to use as, or a lot of naysayers like to go and say, well, she was obviously in a bad relationship and all this, but it's like, all we know about that was from that email that she had sent to Allison that, there's, they're working on things. And so they're taking time to themselves. That's what we really do know. Because that's when this email had come allegedly from Komel. It came from her email. So we can assume it was Komel. But we don't know necessarily for sure either on that.
Well, this is why people shouldn't focus on that. They should just focus on what do the actual documents say. Right. If you're going to focus on some weird group that has no proof that David Crowley is guilty, you get what you get.
Right.
So, I mean, why even go there? Like, why waste your time there? And don't you realize they're trying to waste your time? They're trying to make sure that you don't look at these things, these simple facts that we're talking about here.
Well, I mean, at this point, as far as I'm concerned, we've already proven David's innocent, and it's a triple homicide. So I'm looking at all the other details.
I think the police do too. I mean, they never come out and say, their only thing where they say, oh, David, we can't find anybody else, so it must be David. But you couldn't find David, so it can't be David.
Right. Well, it's the one thing, like, any investigative team looking at this would have said, okay, for instance, there's no blood there really other than, this few droplets here and there, right? And then these smears on the wall. That's all they're seeing. But where's all the blood on the floor?
Where's the gunshot spatter?
Right. Then there's mold. Why didn't that get tested? That's my question. That would have been something that would have been most likely, at least, on the medical examiner's report. And if it was on the medical examiner's, that would have been on a document that most likely we would have had, right? So.
Oh, but you must remember, we didn't get all the documents.
Yeah, according to the naysayers, the Judah Morts.
Yeah, that's just a cop-out excuse.
Exactly. That's all that is. So I believe we've probably got everything they're willing to give us, and there's probably some things that they probably removed, but when it comes to phone records, they didn't remove shit. Pardon the language.
And the summaries is just a summary, like the autopsy summaries is just summarizing basically what they found.
Right.
So, I mean, if there's anything else to add, they would have added it. They would have had the tests back, the drug tests and everything by that time.
Yeah, and there's no mention of any kind of forensic mycology at all. We know that entomology wasn't going to occur. There's a lot of things. It's like we got things confirmed through the summary. We can see there was no forensics on any of this. On top of that, there's no mention of mold really, other than just through a couple medical examiners reports.
There's no mention of David's guilt.
Right.
Yeah.
That's exactly
No
it.
mention.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go and totally sound like a fanboy to Hunt a Killer, even though I do love Hunt a Killer. They're right on that. When it comes down to proving this, we got, we have three things we got to prove here. We got means, motive, and opportunity. Who meets that criteria on all three? And that's really what it comes down to at this point. What do we got to go and prove now? We've already proved he's innocent. That's been done with. That's something that's just been beat on hundreds of times over already at this point. But now we need to go and start looking at who had means, motive, and opportunity.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I'm kind of on the fence about that, because that's not our job. That's the investigator's job.
Yeah.
Sure.
We need to make sure that they understand that, look, David did not do this. You guys need to go and find out who really did this.
Right.
So, but I see why so many people want us to get involved in that, because then they can just go after that instead of going after, what proves David guilty? And so I'm very cautious about that, taking that phase 2, what I call phase 2, when we're still in phase 1, until we can get the police, the investigators, to admit that, look, you guys have not solved this case. You guys do not know who did this. You have 3 people who were actually murdered, and you need to go and find out who did this. Not us. They need to go and do that. So
sure.
How do we get there? How do we get them to access phase 2?
Well, see, that's the thing. We don't actually fully know if they're actually still investigating this or not. We can go off the letter, and if we go off what was said in the letter that Sophia was talking about earlier, you see this shift, right? Now they're talking about homicide. So if they're talking about homicide, my gut is telling me they're looking at this.
Yeah.
And if they're still looking at this, it's in phase 2. I would probably say, because they probably got some suspicions here, which means I actually owe them an apology. Maybe they are really looking into this. And if they are, I do apologize. Maybe you guys aren't as big of idiots as I thought you were. My bad. But end of the day, we can't, it's not necessarily our job to do it. But end of the day, I mean, we can go and call people out as people of interest, right? Because that's not libel. That's not slander. Why are they? Well, we've got proof why they are. We've already got them in police reports lying. We've got these really, really curious things in conversations being said. So you've got all these different interviews where they're already pushing a narrative, right? I mean, we've got some things we can really go off, and so it may not be our job to go and say, oh, this is a suspect. Well, we can point out people of interest. We can go and bring information to light for the police, and whether they take that or not, that's up to them. But they can see directly how we came up with it. If they're willing to go and speak to any of us, then we can go and give that information to them as well, show exactly how we came up with this, yada, yada, yada. And as long as there's no illegal methods, we're not tampering the investigation, if you know what I'm saying. So we can still get them that information. And that's why I'm still looking. I've already feel like it's already been proven. It's 100%. David is innocent. This is a triple homicide. So now at this point, for me, it's let's get the means, let's get the motive, let's get opportunity, and let's find out who did this, or at least people of interest that could fit into this. And then we just got to have the police investigate them, which technically gets into the near illegal type of activity. That's why it's like, okay, well, we can get this far, and then it's up to the police. So,
well, yeah, and we don't want to interfere,
right,
with their investigation. If they are still investigating, we don't want to interfere with that. We don't want, so it's a very slippery slope. Yeah. But let's I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up. If either of you have any final comments, please make them.
Oh, no, I'm good.
Well, I'd just like to thank the listeners for joining us for this podcast. And just please, keep looking at the reports and the crime scene photos and everything, because we could use everybody looking at this case to help us out. And anyway, that's about it.
All right. Well, until next time, then we'll shut this one down. I think maybe William and I will come back maybe next week and continue back
Timeline?
into the timeline talks. So yeah, I'll keep you posted on that.
Yes, I got definitely a lot more coming with that one right now. So
Awesome.
yeah,
Yeah, and we've only gotten to page 2, so it's
unfortunately.
we still have a lot to go through here.
Yeah.
All right. Well, happy Sunday to everybody, and until next time, may God bless you all, and thank you all for watching.
All right. God bless.
God bless.
Good night.
Good night.